Well, let's talk about the upcoming election. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda MacCharles, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the La Presse. Hello to the three of you.
Hi, Michael.
So, here we are. We just heard Donald Trump. And again, he's commenting on the Canadian campaign election, second time this week. And he said, quote, "I don't care who wins up there. Frankly, would probably do better with a Liberal than the Conservative if you want to know the truth." What type of impact does that have on Mark Carney and the Liberals, Bob? What does it have in terms of impact for the other parties involved?
Well, I'm not sure that it's going to have much of an impact. Anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is usually not true. And I wouldn't be surprised if Conservatives here in Canada were begging the Republicans to please ask Trump to say something bad about Pierre Poilievre because he's in trouble, as we've seen in the polls. I don't think that it's going to have much of an impact, but it certainly helped Mr. Poilievre this week was able to come out and say, look, you see, he likes the Liberals because they're weak, they're pushovers, I'm Mr. Tough Guy, I'm a better candidate. But I don't think that it really is going to have much of an impact because I don't think Canadians believe anything that Donald Trump says.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a Trump discount. Anything he says, it's not inflated by a 25% tariff, but I think that Canadians are now getting their heads around taking everything he says a little bit more in stride than we have been because it's been a roller coaster for 2 months. And but I do agree with Bob that it does allow the Conservatives to have a bit of a pushback against the Liberal attack that they're and they haven't used this in a while, but the MAGA light or the Maple MAGA stuff. So it's useful for the Conservatives in that way. But notwithstanding that, we're already seeing in the advertising that the Liberals are putting out that there's a repetition of language. There is a political rhetorical message that is being pitched by the Conservatives that the Liberals are saying echoes Trump. And that is a potential pitfall for him. Look, the polls are showing that there's been this surge in patriotism, surge for the Liberals, but that vote's soft. And so I think that potentially the Conservatives are going to look to exploit it further. And, no one can argue that, that was a gift to him to have Trump say, I'd rather a Liberal.
I see it in a bit of a different way. The comments by Mr. Trump to me, he's expressing some frustration because Mr. Carney is not bitten at anything that is thrown at him. And he said during the trip on which Tonda and I were, he said that he's not going to engage with Donald Trump until he shows respect towards Canada. He stopped talking about the 51st states. So Mr. Carney, even also by going to Europe before going to Washington, he's establishing his rapport de force with Mr. Trump in a very shrewd way, in my sense. And that, to me, shows some frustration on the part of Mr. Trump that he cannot manipulate like a dog or a cat manipulates a mouse. You can't do that with Mr. Carney.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned the polls, Tonda. 338 today comes out with this analysis, and based on their numbers, they aggregate all the polling numbers, and 338 says that the Liberals right now are at 39, Conservatives at 37. There's a plus or minus 4% there. But when you translate that over to seat projections, again, 338 Canada saying that the Liberals would get, if an election were held today, 178 seats. Conservatives 129, the NDP all the way down to 9. Bob, when you look at those types of numbers, how is that affecting campaign strategies right now, do you think?
Well, I don't buy those numbers, those seat projections. I think a lot of the seat projections is voodoo stuff, but because all the polls also show, and this is unusual, first of all, Ontario decides the elections, Quebec decides which is going to be a majority or a minority. The Conservatives are still doing well in Ontario, largely amongst new immigrants. So this is unusual. Normally what happens is that the Liberals, when they get Ontario, but the Conservatives are still competitive there. So it's still a tight race, and it's still volatile. And I think the Conservatives are panicking a bit for sure. They haven't got a message that's resonating with people, at least with Mr. Carney. I am going to deal strongly with President Trump, and I am going to build this economy. We've got all kinds of different messages from Mr. Poilievre, including this still acts the tax stuff. which is like that was last year's message.
And 2 years of Canada's broken messaging that was super successful for him, for Mr. Poilievre, is hard to turn around on a dime and say, oh, actually, I didn't mean Canada was broken. Actually, I meant it was like we're united and we're strong and Canada first. So I think that's a problematic switch from a political messaging point of view anyway. But I agree with Bob that, I think there's a certain amount of dread and apprehension in the Conservative ranks because they see the same polls we see and they're seeing their own internals. And as for Ontario, actually, it's a dead heat right now, which was unheard of 3 months ago. It's a sudden and complete change. Atlantic Canada is swinging back into the Liberal camp. Quebec is being, right now, the vote in Quebec is a Liberal vote. The Liberals are leading. It's unbelievable. So.
And the Bloc Québécois is also scared because they're losing the support of the 55-plus crowd, which usually they vote traditionally a lot for the Bloc Québécois, but they're gone. They're moving away to the Liberal Party. As for the Liberal vote, one thing that is very interesting is that it's a very efficient vote. Whereas, so in national polls, if the Tories are not ahead by 2 points or more, they can't hope to win even a minority because the Liberal vote is so efficient in urban ridings and big cities. So that's, very scary numbers for the Conservative. If they are not ahead by at least 3 points, they can't have a hope of winning, forming the government.
Well, by evidenced by the fact that they won the popular vote last time around and the Liberals were still in government.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, for the first time really in a number of elections, this campaign, everything will turn on this campaign. So much turns on this campaign. And yes, it's trite to say campaigns matter, but not just the issues and the Trump factor, but the leadership style of the leaders in the campaign and how they show Canadians they're prepared to confront a crisis and be transparent and accountable to Canadians and understand and be compassionate. That's all on the table. It's all an issue. Those are vote-driving things now.
Okay.
And we have to be very, very careful about on April the 2nd when those global tariffs come in. That can change a lot of the election calculus from Trump to cost of living. And that is something that might help the Conservatives because Canadians may say, after 10 years of Liberal government, I think the Conservatives have a better message on cost of living. It may not because Mr. Carney is new and he's got good ideas as well. But I think we have to watch how the polls go after April 2nd and the first weeks after that.
Yeah, well, in the meantime, we've been watching Mark Carney, of course, now Prime Minister for the last couple of weeks or so, although officially just sworn in. Let's talk a bit about his performance because we know the fact that he had no political experience coming into this job. And yet here he is now answering tough questions, and he still seems to be tripping over the issue of assets. What do you make of what we've seen about Mark Carney so far and his ability to take on this job?
Well, look, he's very sensitive. He gets brittle when he gets tough questions from political reporters. We're a different breed than financial reporters who look up to the central banker. Tonda does not mince words when she goes after politicians. And
we love you, Tonda.
but I think he's made a mistake here. I think he should just he's now finally said he's going to set up a conflict of interest screen, and that would recuse himself from any dealings presumably with Brookfield Asset Management. But he still owns stock in the company and stock options, and I think it'd be cleaner for him, even though he's put everything in a blind trust. I think it's cleaner for him to be able to say, this stock is being sold. I don't have to recuse myself from anything anymore because I don't have any financial assets at all involved with Brookfield management assets.
I think what we saw is in his first couple of news conferences when he was sworn in and then in the during the European trip we were on, he was testy with certain tough questions. But I also noticed over the course even of this week, because he's done a couple of other news conferences since then, he's adjusting, he's switching, he's dialing back the testiness, so he's learning. He acknowledged, after the event in Iqaluit this week, there was this sort of the Rangers wanted to shake his hand. It was just a normal, natural moment, but he didn't know what to do with his mug. He's swinging his mug around, and he looks at me and goes, oh, I guess I haven't really mastered this retail stuff yet. And I go, well, at least you know it.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows it. He's learning on the job. I think he's also, funnily enough, I think he's getting better at spinning a political message. Like, he does try to engage substantively on questions, but he's also getting better, I think, at some political spin, because he spun some of the stuff he did this week as a bit more action-oriented, when, in fact, the substantive outcomes are still to be seen. It was very much a positioning trip, let's say that.
Oh yeah, big time.
A lot of symbolism.
Yes, yes, and also very strategic. And now, in terms of the election and Mr. Carney's performance so far, I would say that, as Tonda mentioned, he's adjusting. But clearly in this election, I don't think Canadians are looking for the most charismatic figure or the most fluently bilingual person. They're looking for somebody who will reassure him and make sure that we go through this headwinds with the United States and come out alive out of it. And that's what I think they're looking for. That's why in Quebec, I'm hearing stuff like that. They pick on us, they attack us in the media when we mention that Mr. Carney's French is not up to the task to Mr. Trudeau, for example. And they said, no, give him a pass. We need somebody who can lead the country at a time when there's a lot of political
you know,
turmoil.
you can't take this away from Mr. Carney. He is enormously qualified.
Absolutely.
Two-time central bank governor. He's worked in major investment banks around the world. I mean, he can call up the hedge fund managers and big corporate guys. And he knows all these people, and he knows world leaders because he was involved in the G7, G20 and G7 as both Bank of Canada governor, but also the Bank of England governor. So and he's managed real economic crisis.
And to Bob's point, he got sworn in as Prime Minister Friday. The next morning, he was meeting the President of France, he was meeting the King, and then afterwards of England, and then the Prime Minister of England the same day. Tell me a leader who could get those meetings aligned in one day, like that, 3 days after being sworn in.
It's also, to me, interesting that we're holding him to a standard to answer questions, be transparent about all of this, and to be responsive to media. There has been a different level of responsiveness from the Conservative Party for 2 years, really. And so some of that has to be seen in perspective, I think. But I, like Joël-Denis, am struck by the number of readers who are reaching out and telling us, stop trying to drive a good person out of politics. They're very sensitive to criticisms of Mark Carney.
That's very telling, Tonda.
Yes.
That is very telling from the readers.
They are not liking much of the critical writing around him right now.
And that's probably due to the political context that we're in.
Yeah, well, without a doubt, this is going to be a very interesting election to be covering. So glad you guys are here
Thank you.
this evening. Bob, Tonda, Joël-Denis, thank you.
Thank you.